What happens when you take a stand-up comedian with his dark humor, his shots of tequila, and you combine it with a positive motivational speaker? I don't know. Have you heard that joke before, Steve?
No, but if you give me shots of tequila, the shirt's probably coming off.
Woo! That made me giggle. Do you know what is the number one thing? I'm sure you do. But for the audience, what's the number one thing that women are looking for in a good man?
Well, all you got to do is ask my wife, because she was recently asked that question.
Really?
And she said, he makes me laugh every day. And
Every day.
that was her answer.
I think most of us would settle once a week, but hey, like every day. So I've understood in my short history of being funny that there's about 7-9 different types of humor. And some of the types of humor get old because they're like the puns, right? We had Drew Tarvin on the show, and he loves puns. And that's not totally my type. So do you know what your type of humor is, and why doesn't it get old with the wifey?
Well, I'm a storyteller. I'm the guy that, even when I prepare to speak, I've got what I call, story points. And it helps people remember the point. And it takes something that most people might look at. I put it this way, Jessica, 5 people can see the same thing I do. They don't see it funny. I turn it into humor. And sometimes people will go, gosh. And I think that's the thing is I'm a storyteller. Ron White is somebody that, with his delivery, a comedian in the US that just absolutely, the way he sets it up and delivers it, he's not a joke teller, he's a storyteller. And he can tell something that somebody else could tell, and it's not funny. He makes it funny.
And is that because he just has that funny bone and he knows the timing perfectly, or it's natural?
Well, I think, my mother used to say, you're between a nitwit and and witty. So with me, I'm very quick, and somebody might say something and right away something pops into my head. Now, that's good and bad, because there's sometimes you say something and you're like, go back. There's other times you say something and it's kind of like, it's that turn, it's that quick. It's kind of like when I prepare, I literally get material 10 to 15 minutes prior to going on stage. I will, if I'm at a head table, if I'm sitting at a table, they'll say, this is reserved for you, sit here with all they might say something and I'll look at them and I'll go, I find that interesting. And they'll go, oh, please don't use that. And it's kind of interesting because speakers get so caught up in, these are the first things I'm going to say. Whereas with me, as I'm sitting, waiting or listening, observing, the speaker before me may say something because I have absolutely opened and I've literally say, so that was kind of interesting. So let's kind of review. What have we learned so far? And then I do 1 or 2 punch points that are very funny that just came literally moments before me.
Wow. So I'd have to say, people listening in the audience, that he has the improv humor, which is in the moment, being able to see the funny in a situation that the rest of the people just go, it's a dog crossing the street. In your brain, it isn't just observational. There's something funny about what's happening right now. Witty. Do you prefer the word, he's a witty humor, he's a humorous speaker, he is a funny guy? What's your favorite nickname?
I would say funny, but I like comedic. I like to know that, somebody will look at it, where he's a brilliant comedian, if he had to do 20 or 25 minutes. And here's something, Jessica, twice in my career, the comedian who didn't show up for the entertainment part of the conference didn't show, and they asked me if I would do it. Now, I'm already hired to do the opening keynote, or I've already done a luncheon keynote, and that evening, the comedian doesn't show, and they say, one actually said to me, I'll never forget, it was Oklahoma City, she said, name your price, we've got to have entertainment tonight. We've got 900 people here. And I did about 45 minutes of stand-up.
No.
Excuse me.
And were you fast enough to do stand-up from what happened during the day with callbacks?
Well, I did callbacks, but also, again, I'm a storyteller. So I looked at everything that, I look at my family, I tell stories about my family. I'm the kind of guy that says, I've got 4 boys. I'm the guy that would say, when you introduce me, listen, I've got a great family. I've got 3 wonderful sons and another one. And you can even say something as simple as, I'm very happily married. My wife isn't. And when you say things,
Yeah.
it's a segue into talking about family. And, so I probably did that night in Oklahoma City, 15 minutes just on my family. And
Mhm.
again, that humor is literally, it's going to be self-deprecating.
Yeah.
It's going to be something, where you say, like when you brag, you say something like, I got through college in 3 terms. Unfortunately, that was Ford, Carter, and Reagan. And and people begin to realize that you've connected with them.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself down. You're not putting another person
Yeah.
down,
Okay.
but it's a family thing. So that's
Mm.
how I did it.
So I've noticed I've been stalking funny speakers for the last year now, and I've looked at you guys as legends. And I've been looking, well, you and Tim Gard, we interviewed him last week. Me, myself, and I interviewed him last week. And his thing is like clean humor. And you're talking about like relatable, clean. Well, what other adjective would you add that has made your career so thriving, I suppose is the word. Is there another secret?
Well, 2 things. Number 1, I'm G-rated. You
Okay.
know, it's just something that I don't feel you need to even say so much as HE double hockey sticks.
Mhm.
I never put another person down to get a laugh, and I've
Oh,
seen that happen.
wow.
I've watched speakers who they find it funny and it's easy. Now, I've
Yeah.
had people come to me and say, "Listen, hey, here's a perfect guy to pick on." Now, this is the meeting planner telling me this. I actually say, "If you'll introduce me to that gentleman or that lady, then I'll talk to them." But
Yeah.
still, you're rolling the dice
Mm.
because if somebody doesn't know that you got permission, they might
Yeah.
feel bad for the person. So
Yeah.
I'm one that sticks with, if you're going to poke fun at somebody, poke it at yourself, poke it at your family. Um, it's kind of interesting because, when I'm self-deprecating, you also have to be vulnerable. And I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of speakers slash comedians have a problem. I talk about, my first marriage, and when I talk about my first marriage and I say, and I refer to her, I'll just say, the boy's mom, otherwise known as the plaintiff, you know, and I actually recently said, I'd probably still be married to her if I'd have got along with her boyfriend. I mean, it's hello. But
If
that's
you
that's the
burning that,
vulnerability.
right?
Listen, nobody's proud of the fact that their marriage didn't work out. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, but yet the audience, there are people in that audience that have gone through it. I
Yeah.
had a woman come up to me prior to Christmas, one of my last events in San Antonio. She came up, some tears. She said, "These are happy tears and sad tears," but she said, "You were very funny. I wanted you to know I went through a very, very, very bitter divorce, but," she said, "you made me realize there's life after it." She said,
Oh.
"Thank you for making me laugh, and
Mm.
thank you for making me realize that the best is yet to come." And that's what it's all about. But you gotta be vulnerable to do that.
You there's this whole talk. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn because I'm trying to grow the career. And if you remember back before you were famous, it took, I hope, if I'm not doing it wrong, it takes some time to build some momentum, right? And I'm using LinkedIn for that. And everyone's talking about like the vulnerable leader. And I'm like, I do not see vulnerability happening. I see people being vulnerable about like very like not serious things, but keeping up the status quo and still trying to be really cool to not lose followers. But if they used humor, they could achieve both like relatability, likability, and vulnerability. And yet so many people are afraid to be funny or even try to be funny. What is this human psychological fear that is so strong in people to not try and get a laugh?
Well, it's like leaders, I again, you brought up the subject of leadership and vulnerability. I talk about authenticity, but I tell people, in order to be authentic, you have to be humble.
Hmm.
Being humble breeds authenticity. So
Oh,
one equals the other. So if you want to be authentic, be humble. If you want to be humble, be authentic. If you want to be believable, be vulnerable. Because when you're vulnerable with somebody, I had a speaker one time, Jessica, said to me, and I now live in North Carolina, and he said, I'm speaking over at Wake Forest University. Come and see me. And I want you to kind of like, tell me what you think. When it was over, I looked at him and I said, do you want sincere, constructive feedback? He said, absolutely. And I said, nobody connected with you. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you were perfect. You had the perfect life. You had the perfect childhood. You have the perfect wife. Everything is perfect. Your dog's perfect. I said, everything about you. And I said, you were talking to a group that probably 70 to 80% of them have imperfections. So you didn't connect with them. And I said, when you start talking about your perfect children, your perfect wife, your perfect life, your perfect family, all of the things that you've accomplished. I mean, he showed a short video at the beginning and I was sitting there going, I can't do that. Who's this guy? It's kind of like, but if you look at somebody and can relate to them, I'm going to give you an example. The idea behind this is, you got to adapt your humor to the culture of who you're in front of. I recently was speaking in front of several thousand HR professionals. So here's an HR professional. Think about what they do for a living. Think about people look at them like, oh, no, there they are. Shh, don't say that. Be careful. Don't do this. So when I get on stage, I'm at this huge convention, right? I walk on stage and the first thing I say, Jessica, is I said, listen, hey, before I get started, I do want to make a public service announcement. I know a lot of you come to these conventions, you go out, you have a great time, right? Public service announcement. If you're going to go out and drink adult beverages, and if you're going to drink a lot of those adult beverages, take your name badge off. Yeah. I said, last night you get in the elevator and all of a sudden you're looking at the vice president of human resources for a company and they're like, hey, you doing? He's like, hey, I bet they're proud they sent you here. And they all laugh, but that's adapting to the culture of that audience. It's one of those things like, you might be an HR if, Jeff Foxworthy does a thing on you might be a redneck if. Well, you might be an HR if. Yeah. So I think that's the thing is when you take what they do for that living, it's like a teacher. Think about teachers. I speak in front of educators. And I look at all these teachers, and the first thing I'll say to them, have you ever met a parent that after they've left the parent meeting, you've actually said to yourself, well, that explains Jimmy. Because but again, it's relatable to them. It's something that they can relate to. I've listened to speakers, Jessica, that are good speakers. They're articulate. They probably forgot more than I know. But the problem with it is when they're speaking, it's the same keynote speech to every audience. It's the same joke. And I'm not a joke teller, but even if it's a story, it's the same story. You've got to be flexible. You've got to know what works now. You've got to adapt the humor to who's in that audience.
And because you're on radio and silence is the devil essentially in that kind of training, do you think that's why you got so quick, or were you always extremely quick? Is there hope for slow thinkers out there and slow speakers?
Absolutely. And here's the reason why there's hope is the audience doesn't know what you're supposed to say. They don't know what your 60 minutes is comprised of. And if you pick up a story or you mold it, fashion it, exaggerate it, make the little fish, the big fish, whatever you do with that, it's something like it's when one of your children listen to you tell a story and look at you afterwards and go, I don't remember that. I'm like, well, it happened about this size, but I made it this size. It's kind of like you adapt it, and that story then becomes very, very funny. You can take things in life that have happened to you, and you can make them funny, or you can make them sad. I mean, you can sit there. It's life. It's the way you see it. Listen, perspective is worth 80 IQ points. The way you see something, it's the perspective that you give it.
So do you take this this humor perspective, right? I think it's like it's not a religion, but it's a way of living, right? All the guys that I'm talking to are saying you choose to be funny. You choose to make fun of yourself, and that you choose. It's like you're choosing to see it in a sad way, a funny way, a serious way. You choose what comes out of your mouth. You choose how you see it. So this is like extremely empowering for people to know that adding a little bit of humor can duplicate the happiness in your life because it shifts everything that you look at. No, isn't it beautiful?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like going through a drive-through. Your order is, so your order is 10.08. Let's say your order comes out to $10.08. You
Right.
go through the drive-through, and I'm OCD, and as a matter of fact, I'm not OCD, I'm CDO. I put the letters in alphabetical order as they should be. Right? So the first thing I do is I grab 8 cents. I grab 8 cents, and then I have a $20 bill. I don't have a 10. So I've got, and let's say it was even 7.08. No matter what it is, I'm grabbing the 8 cents and I've got the $20 bill. So I go the 20.08. The look on the person's face when you give them the 8 cents is priceless. It's just priceless because
Wow.
they have no idea. And you're sitting there going, just punch it into the machine. It'll do.
Because you know.
But you can either get frustrated with that, get
Yeah.
upset with that,
Yeah.
or by the time you get your food, you can turn it into a whole funny piece. And you can actually embellish it to the point. And if you heard me tell that story, by the way, I tell that story because it actually happened, and I turned it into something hilarious just because of something that would frustrate someone else. I turned it into something that I thought was kind of humorous, And again, it goes back to this coming week. I will fly to Rapid City. I've got an event with AGC of South Dakota and a company called Skull Construction. I'm going to do 2 events, one private and one for, association.
Okay.
But you got to understand, I'm going to know who's in that audience. I'm going to know that construction group. I'm going to know what type of construction it is. And my humor will be so relatable to that blue collar crowd. It doesn't matter if it's blue collar, white collar, as I mentioned before, HR, education, doesn't matter who it is. I will adapt to that. And I will tell several stories that they can relate to. And they might have even related to it on their way to work.
Yeah. So have you seen in your long career, not calling you old, but in your career, how your humor has adjusted to the multicultural, multi-generational? Like, are the Gen Zs laughing at what the boomers are? The boomers are almost retired, but are they laughing at the same thing? Do you think humor is intergenerational?
Oh, I think it's intergenerational. And I think what happens is you take that piece and it's no different than, and I'll use something very, very simple. It's kind of like when you write a book in 2005 before all of the social media and you're referring to different things. And then you have to go back and do a rewrite. And then you have to begin to put in smartphone. You have to begin to put in, there was no iPad. And you just bring it up to date. So what you do is you bring your humor up to date. And if you're going to reference, I had one time a guy referenced Rodney Dangerfield, and he goes, "Boy, a lot of people didn't laugh." I go, "Nobody knows who it was." They go, "They said he's one of the greatest." I go, "Of the generation, he was one of the greatest comedians."
Yeah.
So what is being said sometimes just needs to be more, and I'll use the word modernized to that audience. And having sons that are, from 30 on up, I understand some have a sense of humor that, you got to break it down into, well, they don't find that funny. Well, make it funny. Find something that relates to them that truly is funny.
And so is that why being rated G for everyone is the safe things to talk about are making fun of yourself, family, because almost everyone can relate to that. But obviously religion doesn't work if you have like a lot of different religions in the room. Of course, you don't joke about religion, but even your, as a white male, perception of things could be very unrelatable, or I'm just fearful of that. Is that something that you've ever experienced, that like, man, those Chinese do not get me?
Well, I guess the best way to say it is I spoke at the $1 Million Round Table several years ago, 2012. And I had to go in early because I was on the main stage and they said, what you're going to say is going to be interpreted. So I went through some of the stories I was going to tell.
Yeah.
What was funny, Jessica, was being on stage and seeing somebody from Asia laugh after somebody from another country. It was like this group's laughing and then this. It was like, what's the interpretation? Well, I made a joke about that. I actually made a joke about that. I said, okay, next story. Let's see who gets it first. You know, and I'm like, it was hilarious because everybody was laughing because everybody was in tune. People have to realize this. And speakers, we keep saying about generations, but just remember this social media revolution, the whole visual, that's what changed my career. In 2005, when YouTube came out, right?
Yeah.
People had to go to your website before that. And even then, the streaming was so slow. But once YouTube came out, I started to realize that you could put videos on YouTube and all of a sudden somebody was watching it. I've had clients who have hired me and said, excuse me, I had a cold, by the way, for anybody listening. So I got a little frog in my throat. The thing about it was they would say to me, oh my gosh, we watched all your clips on YouTube. They were hilarious. Or, oh, you got to tell this. I actually, Jessica, have clients who'll say, please tell the Margaret story. Please tell the story about how you met your wife. Please tell all of this. Yeah. And it's great because they're getting it from there and they're just getting pieces.
Gotcha.
But a lot of it, listen, I don't care what generation, you have brothers, you have sisters, you have moms, you have dads. We have technology. We have people that are good with technology. We have people that aren't good with technology. We have people that understand artificial intelligence, and we have people that have artificial intelligence. So.
Well, you were fascinating. We are pretty close to the end. My new friend, who is very funny, and I have to give a secret. I hope they're not listening, but some of the funny people I've interviewed have not been super funny in the interview. And I was really sad to figure that out. And they tell me, no, on stage, I have a different energy. And I thought, oh, well, I couldn't have guessed that. But you are very funny in real life. And I haven't seen you on stage. But I think it's more Well, I just thank you for.
You're welcome. Well, you know what? When you're flying to an event, ask yourself, did you make the person beside you laugh? Did you make the flight attendant laugh?
Yeah,
When you're with somebody, do you make your server laugh? I mean, the whole idea is if you blend that humor, that's who you are as a person. You can't, I have a hard time with, you don't turn it on and turn it off.
Gotcha.
The old saying, as a neighbor of mine used to say, either you is or you isn't.
Yeah. Well, you is funny, man.
Well, thank you.
I've been trying to interview funny women, and because we're socialized to be the laughers of the funny men, I have a hard time finding a lot of funny women. Just if you do have like an extra minute, are you able to speak on that a little bit? And
I'm going to give you a name, and I want to see her on your show.
Okay.
And I'll actually try to get the introduction here in the next couple of days. Her name is Julie Birch.
Okay.
Julie Birch is a very funny lady. As a matter of fact, I have spoken at events that she has spoken at afterwards or before. She's a very funny woman, and you will enjoy. As a matter of fact, you need to get to know her to network with her, because as you build your career, a lot of her clients, she's going to be interrelatable with you, but she's going to be a great interview too.
Awesome. That's great. Well, it brings me joy to hear that your wife still laughs every day with you, because I have a sign on my wall that says it literally says, smile, stop crying, stop pouting. It's because I have to choose to find the funny in the situation. I'm no different than anyone else, but it's so easy to choose the not funny route because it takes a little bit more effort. It's like looking at the optimism. It's the desire to make someone else laugh. It takes a little bit of effort, folks, just like abs, I've heard.
Yeah. Well, you asked me at the beginning of you brought up tequila, and I said, I can't do that. I'll take my shirt off. The secret to my wife laughing every day, I take my shirt off.
It's that easy.
It's that easy. Just whoop,
it jiggles.
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, yeah. She has a very affectionate name for me. So, yeah.
Oh, that's not coming up.
And she put her arm around me one time. We were on a cruise. We had both had a very, lovely evening. Let's just say we have the drink package. right?
Okay.
Read between the lines. And
Mm.
when she put her arm around me that night, she said, "You're kind of spongy." And it's stuck ever since. And I'm like, you know what? I'll be your sponge, Steve.
SpongeBob Square.
Yep,
Mm,
sponge Steve right here.
oh, well, that's very sweet. Well, you've made me laugh. I sound like I have a cold now because we both have kind of froggy throats. So,
Well,
Steve,
thank you.
thanks for bringing more humor into the world. I think the world needs more humor, less war, and I think people who are brave and dare do it and know that maybe they won't laugh are really outstanding people. So,
Very good.
thanks.
Jessica, thank you so much. And those that wanted to see my wife, there's a picture behind me. And
Okay.
that's my favorite cat, Kramer. And as you see, the sign says, "This is my happy place." So it's
Kramer.
Diane and Kramer.
Was it after Kramer from Seinfeld, or is there someone else in the world
It
named
is
Kramer?
after Kramer from Seinfeld.
Does he do this like weird head thing, your cat?
No, Kramer does a lot of weird things.
Oh, lovely. It's nice to have laughter in the house, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Well, we are promoting that we are looking for women who want to be funnier.
Got it.
So, any of you watching know a funny woman, please. I love funny men, but I'm already married, so I'm looking for funny women to interview. And we're having a retreat in Barcelona with hopefully a couple of funny women coming to speak with us. So, your Kramer and your wife can come.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks,
All right.
Jessica.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.